The NFL playoff race is heating up, and with 4 weeks left in the regular season, so much is up for grabs. Johnny talks sports with my Week 14 NFL predictions. Last week I went 9-7, which for the second week in a row, it's not a terrible record, but it's still a bad record on my end because I've done better at points in the season, but I've done worse at other points in the season. So I'm just hoping that week 14 shows some promise. We have some good matchups this week that will impact not only divisions, but the playoff race. So as always, we begin with the Thursday night game, and this week, Thursday night football features the Dallas Cowboys and the Chicago Bears. Now both these teams are coming off Thanksgiving Day games. The Bears beat the Lions, and the Cowboys got completely embarrassed by the Buffalo Bills, a team that has flown under the radar this season. So the way I see this matchup, last week we saw flashes of the Bears offense. When the Bears offense needed to perform, it did. And for the Cowboys, they are just completely unconfident right now. Last week, there can be screams heard in the Cowboys locker room. It appeared that there's a lot of, well, it's described as the team's not really getting along with each other, and it's being reported that some Cowboys players have completely given up on head coach Jason Garrett. Now, I know the Cowboys have not beat a team above 500 this season, but this is a pretty even match against the Chicago Bears this week. Both defenses, they can pull out some stops. The offenses, they do good some weeks, but they struggle in other weeks. But I'm going to take the Cowboys in this matchup to respond, and I think this is going to be a relatively low-scoring game. I just think that the Bears' defense is exactly what I knew it was going to be in preseason. That the defense for the Bears is going to be okay, but it's not going to be as elite or as intimidating as last year. So I'm going to go with the Cowboys in this matchup. Now we're on the Sunday games. We've got the Colts and the Buccaneers. The Colts, what happened to the Colts just a few weeks ago? They would have been the second seed in the AFC. Well, the Buccaneers, they've got a little bit of a winning streak going on right now. And I'm going to pick the Buccaneers to continue rolling with this one because in these last couple of weeks, the Buccaneers, they have shown some flashes. The defense has really been improving for the Buccaneers. And I think that's going to be some momentum for Tampa Bay moving forward. But right now, I just got to see a little bit more of Jameis Winston. I think with Jameis Winston, if he can stop turning the football over at an alarming rate, this Buccaneers team is going to click faster than we expect it to. But I'm just not sure where they're going to go with Jameis Winston after this season. I feel like that these last 4 weeks is going to show. I feel like at this point, Jameis Winston's playing for his job as the Buccaneers starting quarterback. And with these last 4 weeks, if he does really well these last 4 games, I think they're going to name him the starting quarterback for 2020. But if the Buccaneers happen to go 0-4 to end the season, I could see a quarterback change in Tampa Bay happening. And for the Colts, Jacoby Brissett, he's got to get a lot better in these last 4 weeks if the Colts want to stay in this race to take the AFC South crown. Because right now it's a tight race in the AFC South. The Colts are just hanging in there, but they're starting to slip a little bit. So this is one of the matchups to keep an eye out for this week for improvements on both sides of the ball for both teams. But I will take Tampa Bay. Next, we have the Baltimore Ravens and the Buffalo Bills, one of the best matchups of the week. We've got the Bills who are flying under the radar this season, and the Ravens being led by current MVP frontrunner Lamar Jackson. The Ravens are on a winning streak right now of 7 to 8 games in a row. The Ravens are getting hot, but this is not the time for the Ravens to lose a game. They can't afford to lose games. Neither of these teams can. We've seen the Bills surprise everybody. We've also seen the Ravens pull off upsets against the Patriots and the 49ers so far this season. And we've seen them beat the Seahawks too. But this is going to be a very close matchup. This is going to be a very exciting battle for the quarterback position because Josh Allen, he played really well last week against Dallas. But it's just hard to pick against Lamar Jackson right now. I mean, Lamar Jackson, yes, he was contained a little bit in the passing game, but that's because he was supposed to be by design because the field was sloppy, it was raining. I think Lamar Jackson leads the Ravens to another victory. I'm taking Baltimore. Next, we have the Detroit Lions and Minnesota Vikings. Last week, we saw the Lions fight really well on Thanksgiving this past Thursday with third-string quarterback David Blau. And Matthew Stafford is still sidelined with the injury, and Jeff Driscoll's status is still uncertain. So it's very likely we're going to see David Blau again this week for the Lions. And the Vikings, they are trying to bounce back from Monday Night Football against the Seahawks, a game where they were in control for the first half, but then the Seahawks scored 24 unanswered points on them, and then we saw the Vikings get down by as many as 10 and make it a one-possession game, but they just couldn't pull off at the end. Kirk Cousins once again fails on Monday Night Football and fails again in prime time. However, I think the Vikings do respond this week because this is a so-called layup this week for the Vikings. Although last time I said the Vikings were a layup was against the Broncos and they found themselves down 20-0 at halftime. And this is kind of a common situation right now as well because Brandon Allen is the Broncos' third-string quarterback and the Vikings are once again they're potentially playing another third-string quarterback this week in David Blau. But I think the Vikings pull it off this time. It may not be easy and simple for the Vikings, but I think the Vikings will still get it done this week. I'm going to take Minnesota. Next, we've got the Washington Redskins and the Green Bay Packers. Aaron Rodgers has the Packers in a good position in the NFC North, but no lead is too comfortable. While the Redskins, they have won 2 games in a row with starting quarterback Dwayne Haskins. But I feel like this is going to be a challenge for Dwayne Haskins this week to try to match up to Aaron Rodgers. I'm going to take the Packers because Lambeau, December, in the hunt for the playoffs, hunt for potentially a first-round bye. This is just translating to a Packers win because we always say it a lot. When we think teams like New England and Green Bay struggle, just when we think they're done and they're out of it, they start to pull out win after win after win. And this should be no question about it. I'm going to pick Green Bay, but I'm really rooting for Dwayne Haskins because he was my number 1 quarterback in this draft class this past season. And now he's got 2 wins under his belt as a starting quarterback in the league. I'm going to take Green Bay in this, but I'm rooting for Dwayne Haskins on the inside. Next, we have the Denver Broncos and Houston Texans. Both these teams are coming off big wins last week. The Broncos' record does not define this team. The Broncos have lost so many close games this season. Well, the Texans, they're coming off a big win against the Patriots on Sunday Night Football. And I think this game's going to be really close. I think the Broncos, they're going to stay in this game from start to finish. But I think at the very end, while I see the Texans still being a little bit hungover and a little bit, their egos have kind of built up after beating New England last week, I think they're going to come in a little bit hungover on this. Not hungover as intoxicated, but hungover as in it was a big win. They're going to think they're on top of the world. I think they're going to come back to earth for the first 3 quarters of the game, and they're going to pull it out in the 4th quarter. Kind of like what happened with the Broncos and the Vikings. I think the Broncos are going to have a big lead in this game, and the Texans are going to rally late in the game. I'm going to take Houston. Next, we have a matchup that I think will end up probably being the game of the week when it's all said and done. the 49ers and the Saints. I wish this would have gotten flexed to the Sunday night game. I kind of wish that would happen because this is one of the biggest games of the season. And the 49ers, they're trying to rally from a loss to the Ravens last week in a surprisingly low-scoring game. I really thought both offenses were going to perform. And the Saints are coming off a Thanksgiving win against the Falcons, a game that they probably should have won by a lot more than what they actually did. They allowed the Falcons to recover multiple onside kicks, but the Saints still got the job done. But it's very hard to beat the Saints in New Orleans, and I'm really conflicted with this matchup. I want to pick San Francisco, but I rarely pick against the Saints in New Orleans, and since this game is in New Orleans, I'm going to have to pick the Saints in this one, but I think this is going to be a dogfight in this throughout the whole game. I think we're either going to see an offensive showdown or we're going to see a defensive slugfest. I don't see this game being average in any way, shape, or form. I'm going to pick the Saints to win a low-scoring game. I think the 49ers defense will be able to contain Drew Brees, but I just think in that fourth quarter, Drew Brees is going to do what we've seen Drew Brees do throughout his entire career. I believe he's had over 50 fourth quarter come from behind victories. So I'm going to go with the Saints in a close game. Next, we have the Cincinnati Bengals and the Cleveland Browns. This is one of multiple I have to pick somebody to win this week. The Bengals are coming off their first win of the season against the Jets last week, while the Browns, they got brought back to earth against the Steelers. However, I'm going to pick the Browns because the Browns, they were getting on a winning streak. They were starting to get a little bit too big for their heads. And I'm going to pick the Browns because they were humbled last week. I think the Bengals are coming off that emotional performance last week. So I'm going to pick the Browns to win this matchup. This was just a game where I just had to pick somebody, and I just happened to pick the Browns. You could argue and say this next one is a game where I have to pick somebody, or if anybody, you have the mentality of I just have to pick somebody in this game. You could argue that. In fact, I could see why it's I have to pick somebody. We saw the Panthers do very well with Kyle Allen at quarterback. At one point, he was 5-0 as a starter, but ever since that game against the 49ers, I think the Panthers, they've just have been seeming to get worse and worse throughout this season. They've been losing game after game, while the Falcons, since they're eliminated from playoff contention, hopefully for all Falcons fans, they will begin to tank. Although there are some Falcons fans that want them to keep winning. But when the Falcons end up with a crappy draft pick, they draft somebody they don't even need, that will probably be a bust. I don't want to hear those Falcons fans complaining. Because they wanted their team to win. But if I were a Falcons fan, which I relatively am, I follow Atlanta sports in general, I want this team to tank to have the chance of getting Chase Young, the best prospect in this NFL draft class, and arguably one of, if not the best prospect we've seen in at least the last 3 NFL drafts. But I'm going to take Carolina in this because the Panthers, they're still in a way fighting for a playoff spot. So I'm going to pick the Panthers to keep their season alive because right now Ron Rivera could be on the hot seat and we just don't expect it. In fact, with Black Monday coming up on the final week, after the final week of the regular season, we usually have a head coach firing that is very shocking. And this season's shocker could end up being Ron Rivera. But I'm going to take Carolina to win this week, keep their playoff hopes and their season alive. Next, this is another I have to pick somebody this week, and I just happen to pick the Dolphins. Why? Because the Dolphins, they are showing heart. The Dolphins, they have been competitive in a season where a lot of us expected them to be tanking. The Jets, they got humbled last week against the Bengals, and right now, I think that's a season breaker for the Jets. The Dolphins, yes, they want Tua Tagovailoa, but with his injury, the Dolphins, it's in their best interest to win games if they still want Tua Tagovailoa, because it will save them a lot of money because Tua Tagovailoa's draft stock is, right now, I think it's going to plummet with his injury because we've seen Joe Burrow step up to the plate this season. I could even see possibly Jake Fromm getting that number 2 spot as the second quarterback drafted, depending on how he does in this later portion of the college football season, or even Justin Herbert. But right now, I'm picking the Dolphins to win this week because it's Fitz magic time. So I'm going with the Dolphins. And this is another one where I have to pick somebody because both teams, yeah, it's just not been the season for these two teams, the Chargers and the Jaguars. So I'm going to do something I have never done before here on Johnny Talk Sports. I'm going to predict a tie because both teams have been so bad this season. I feel like there's really no reason to pick anybody. I really want to do this for the Dolphins and Jets, but I really thought that the Dolphins would win against the Jets anyway. And also, I think the Browns will beat the Bengals anyway. So I'm going to pick a tie in this game. I don't think anybody's going to win. We're all going to lose. The people that pay money to see this game is going to lose. I'm just kidding. I'm going to pick the Chargers to win this game because the Chargers, they've had so many heartbreakers this season. It's really difficult to count all the games of the Chargers they should have won. They've played competitive this season. They just don't have the wins to show for it. But I think they get one this week against the Jaguars. Of course, if it doesn't end in a tie. Next, we have one of the best games of the week, the Kansas City Chiefs and the New England Patriots. And this is a tough one as well, because the Chiefs' offense is firing on all cylinders right now. Ever since Pat Mahomes came back, this offense has it's becoming the Chiefs' offense we've expected it to be. While the Patriots, on the other hand, they have been struggling offensively. And it's really hard for me with this game because I want to pick New England because when was the last time we've seen the Patriots lose back-to-back games? We've seen the Patriots play mediocre one game and come out and dominate the next, whether it's on offense or defense. I'm going to pick the Chiefs. I rarely pick against the Patriots, but I picked against the Patriots one time this season, and it was against the Ravens, and they lost that game. So I'm going to take the Kansas City Chiefs in this matchup because the Chiefs' offense has been improving, while the Patriots' offense, it's starting to go downhill. Although we always ask ourselves the question every year, is the Patriots dynasty over? We think yes every single time, but 2-3 weeks later, the Patriots get back to their winning ways, and so far, and this season, it shouldn't be a surprise when they get back to their ways. I just think that this is the worst case scenario for New England playing Pat Mahomes, considering Mahomes has come so close to beating the Patriots both times that he's faced them. I think the third time will be the charm for Pat Mahomes and the Chiefs. I'm taking Kansas City. Next, we've got the Titans and the Raiders. Titans, they are really surprising me this season. Derrick Henry has had a couple of big performances lately. While the Raiders, well, I think that game against the Jets was ultimately a season breaker for them. So I'm going to pick the Titans to stay afloat in the AFC South. I just think that this Titans team, moving on from Marcus Mariota and bringing in Ryan Tannehill, I think it's really saved the season for the Titans. So I'm going to pick Tennessee because they have momentum at this point. I'm going to take the Titans to win this, at least relatively, by at least a possession and a half, so at least by 10. Derek Carr has really struggled in these last couple of weeks. So I'm going to take the Titans over the Raiders. Next, we have the Steelers and the Cardinals. And last week we saw Devlin Hodges get his second win as an NFL starter. While Kyler Murray, I think he's young and up and coming, but last week was just a huge dose of reality for the Cardinals. And the Cardinals, they do play a little bit better at home than they do on the road. The Cardinals, they can pull off upsets at any time. But I just can't see it with this Steelers team. Juju Smith-Schuster missed the game last week. He was in the concussion protocol. So his status is a little bit uncertain at this point. But James Washington has stepped up for the Steelers in their offense in these last couple of weeks. He stepped up last week. and I think he'll step up again. I'm going to take Pittsburgh to beat Arizona in this matchup. I mean, I like Kyler Murray, I really do, but I just can't see it right now. I feel like Cliff Kingsbury needs some more time to get this offense in the right gear, but I think it's not going to happen this week. I'm going to take Pittsburgh. Saturday Night Football now, we have the Seahawks and the Rams. This is a rematch from a matchup earlier in the season on Thursday Night Football. We saw the Seahawks win by 1 point, and Greg Zuerlein missed a potential game-winning field goal in the waning seconds of that matchup. The Seahawks, they have really played very competitive this season. Arguably one of the best teams in the league, but they're in many close games. They're not dominating teams. They're not rolling people over like they did back with the Legion of Boom. They're not a lockdown defense. And the Rams, they struggled on offense in November. Jared Goff didn't throw a single touchdown pass in the month of November. But last week, I think, was a confidence booster for the Rams by having that blowout win against the Cardinals. Blowout wins like that, it really boosts confidence for teams moving forward. And I think that's the case. I think the Seahawks, arguably, you can say that the Seahawks, they have 9 lives. You can say that for sure, but I think their luck will run out at least eventually, but they may not have luck every single week. I'm going to take the Rams. I think the Rams are back. I think last week was momentum for them. Jared Goff had a career high in passing yards, and I'm going to take the Rams to pull off the upset against the Seahawks. And finally, Monday Night Football, we've got an NFC East showdown between the Giants and the Eagles. Now, division matchups, they are quite common to be very close. And the Eagles, man, last week was just abysmal for them, losing to the Dolphins, a team that many say are tanking, which puts them way more behind the 8 ball in the NFC East, trailing the Dallas Cowboys still. Well, the Giants, I think they just got to salvage what they can at this point. And the Giants will salvage what they can, but I just think that the Eagles, I think they're going to win this week. I think they recover from last week's heartbreaker against the Dolphins. So I'm going to take the Eagles. So those are my picks for this week. For review, I have the Cowboys, Buccaneers, Ravens, Vikings, Packers, Texans, Saints, Browns, Panthers, Dolphins, Chargers, Chiefs, Titans, Steelers, Rams, and Eagles all winning this week. Comment your picks down below, like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you next time.